joining us now to discuss whether Land of Hope and Glory and Rule Britannia should be dropped is writer and commentator Inaya Folarin, Iman, who says axing the anthem would be a kind of censorship and we shouldn't airbrush history. And Professor of Black Studies at Birmingham University, Kehinde Andrews, who says it's about time the songs were pulled as they don't represent Britain today. Kehinde, let's come to you first then. It's worth pointing out that this whole debate has come from a column written by Richard Morrison. He's a white music journalist, been around for many, many years. And the BBC has said they are considering it. And they've cited many reasons, whether that's because there's just far too many instruments and with all the whole coronavirus thing, whether they'll be able to get that many people in. But you do actually agree with Richard Morrison here, don't you? You agree with this journalist that actually we probably should be looking to ban these songs.
Well, I don't think it's about banning the songs. It's about saying what songs are appropriate. And as you said, Britain never, ever, ever shall be slaves. That's a racist propaganda at a time where Britain was the leading slave trading nation in the world. And I'm sorry, the idea that we're having this conversation now, that's a disgrace. I remember my school 20 years ago took Rule Britannia off the hymn sheet because they realised it was totally inappropriate and offensive. So the only real problem here is that we're having this discussion now. This should have been done a long, long time ago.
So what are you asking for? If you're not asking them to be banned, so what are you saying should happen to Rule Britannia, Land of Hope and Glory?
No, ban is the wrong word. I mean, it's not censorship. It's just saying, look, some songs, particularly those two, which this is racist propaganda, which celebrates the British Empire, which killed tens of millions of people, many of which now, like myself and like yourself, actually, are descendants of those victims of colonialism. It's totally inappropriate to have these songs. It's not about banning and censorship. It's about saying, what songs do we want to represent the modern moment? And if, and it's a big if, actually, we do want an anti-racist Britain, then songs like this don't need to be celebrated in the proms.
You know, what do you make of that? You know, Kehinde saying there, it's just not appropriate that we have these anymore, that this, you know, actually not even that this time is to reconsider having these songs, because we should have actually reconsidered it a long time ago.
I find that to be just completely absurd. A recent YouGov poll found that the overwhelming majority of British people supported this, both Remainers and Leavers, so this wasn't a kind of culture war issue. The majority of British people think that we should keep those songs. And another poll by Hope Not Hate in the last couple of weeks found that 51%, a plurality of ethnic minority people, actually agreed with the statement, political correctness had gone mad. So what we're finding is that many things are being done in the name of ethnic minorities and protecting them and stopping them being offended, when that's just simply not how they feel, and I'm being spoken for. When actually this song brings a lot of people a lot of joy and happiness. The majority of people don't listen to this song and go, oh, you know, we want to, you know, reimpose colonialism and slavery. Songs can take on new meaning. It's now become part of a national story which represents pride and a kind of national heritage which actually transcends parochial, racial or ethnic or gender identities. In the video that you just showed, someone waved the LGBT flag during the song, and clearly that would not have necessarily been supported during that time. But now the song, the meaning of the song evolves as our culture has evolved. That means that we don't have...
Kehinde, you're shaking your head furiously there. I'm sensing you're going to disagree.
I mean, the idea, the meaning of Rule Britannia has changed. It hasn't changed at all. And a big part of the problem with this nation is that we just don't teach our history properly. So the fact that the majority of people believe this is okay doesn't mean it's okay. That's because of the deficits in our school system that don't teach us about the horrors of the British Empire. It is not something to celebrate. These songs celebrated. I mean, look, Land of Hope and Glory, a much more reasonable name for the song would have been Land of Racism and Servitude. I mean, I understand that's not a catchy song, but that's the nature of the country we're talking about. So if you're saying in order to be part of the national conversation, we need to embrace racist imperial propaganda, that's the problem where we are today. Ditch the songs, move on. It's not really that big a deal.
No, is it a time for us to be looking at everything forensically? You know, there has been, we've seen the worldwide protests since the murder of George Floyd. You know, we've seen the reaction from everybody. We've seen the calls for change. Is it a time when actually we should be looking at things like songs and statues? Or do you think that that's maybe a distraction from actually delving a bit deeper and thinking, well, is this the right way to be tackling inequality, to make sure that there is proper diversity?
So as you can see, Kanye has a very particular ideological worldview. He has a very one-dimensional view of Britain. He sees it as a kind of land of racism and hate and all of these things. I think that's completely and fundamentally divorced with what most people believe to be Britain. We recognise it has a complex history full of horror and terror, but also triumph and many uplifting things. And I think we need to teach history holistically and not try and teach a kind of narrative of cultural self-loathing, which I think is very divisive. And actually, I agree. I think that this doesn't help a single ethnic minority life. I just find it very hypocritical that a lot of people don't have a problem with, music that talks about stabbing and violence and the N-word this and the N-word that. But a song that actually brings a lot of joy and upliftment to the majority of British people is somehow an issue of censorship. This is not coming from, this is not a democratic decision. This is in the report an opportunistic endeavour, with the coronavirus, using this to forward and push through changes that the majority of people don't support. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's necessary. It does not help ethnic minorities whatsoever.
And one area where I do agree here is that actually, look, this whole conversation is a bit pointless. And if this is what the result of Black Lives Matter is, that we just talk about whether we have songs at the proms or what song you sing at rugby, then it shows you how badly we understand the issue of racism. Look, what happens at the proms, I never watch the proms. I'm sure most people don't watch the proms. We do need to have a much more serious conversation. But just the fact that we're having this is controversial. That the BBC would say, actually, maybe it's time for something new, tells you how far we have to go. If we're having a debate about this, how are we ever going to talking about the wealth gap? How are we going to talk about unfair trade practices? How are we going to talk about what needs to be done with the police? So that's the problem with this debate, is that we just stop.
That's the thing that worries me, Kehinde, about debates like this. And, there is a level of importance to it, but it's whether, in the end, the narrative becomes that the black community almost want to eradicate, and I put myself in that community, I've got African heritage, that somehow we want to eradicate British culture, things that have gone in the past. And as David Olusoga, the historian, says very succinctly, he says, we're not saying we want less history, we want more history. And I think by having this debate, is it regressive in the end of the day? And, you coming on here talking about this, should we really be talking about the things like you just mentioned there, wealth and equality?
Oh, no, certainly. Those things are really important to discuss. But if we can't even agree on this simple thing, then we're never going to get there. And actually, there's a really is an importance in this story, is what is the national story we want to tell about Britain. And when we say we want to, no one's talking about getting rid of history. Land of Hope and Glory and Rule Britannia are not history. They're racist propaganda from a particular time that we can easily move on from. And the fact that it's controversial tells us a lot about the version of Britishness we're seeing, which is we can't have a proper accounting of our history. We can't be critical of Britain. We can't say, actually, there's something we just need to move on from. And if we can't do any of those things, then we're never going to get to the proper discussion. So it does matter. And it does worry me that we're stuck here still, to be honest.
OK. Well, both of you, thanks for joining us this morning. The debate, I'm sure, will continue. Thanks for joining us, Inaya and Kehinde, on the controversial subject matter of whether Land of Hope and Glory and Rule Britannia should no longer exist. I know the BBC are considering it.